Hi guys and welcome. So today we're all about the vanilla, at least I'm all about the vanilla. That ever popular note of vanilla plays such a huge part in gourmands and in just all perfumery, and I've really grown to appreciate it, so I figured I would do a roundup of all my vanilla based fragrances. Fragrances where the vanilla plays a very large focal point, or at least it plays an important integral part of the fragrance whether you know it's there or not. One thing I don't have in my collection is one that is just purely a vanilla fragrance, because I still don't think it's a note I love enough to have on its own. Another reason I wanted to feature all my vanilla focused fragrances is to show how versatile and important vanilla is in fragrances. I always associate vanilla very ignorantly with just smelling like a cake, smelling like, you know, a candle, which is nice, but it's not something I want to smell on myself. I find it very uninteresting. I don't want to smell like a cake. But before we jump into all the fragrances, I have done a little bit of a Googling prep just to broaden my own knowledge of vanilla, because it's pretty limited, to be honest. If you know all there is to know about vanilla, you can totally skip through and start looking at my fragrances. Vanilla, of course, is a spice. It comes from the vanilla orchid plant. Now, vanilla is actually the second most expensive spice in the world, the first being saffron. And that's because vanilla is such a labour-intensive crop. Now, the plant itself only flowers once. Each flower is hand-pollinated, which is obviously a very arduous task. And it takes 5 months before the first fruits are ready. Those fruits, or pods as we know them, then have to be hand-massaged to bring out all the fragrant oil. So it's an incredibly labour-intensive and long process, which is why it's such an expensive spice. So as a note in fragrance, vanilla is probably the most popular and most recognised. But most of the time what we're actually smelling is the synthetic variant of vanilla, which is called vanillin. This is actually a synthetic which imitates the scent of vanilla. And the style of vanilla that it actually imitates is the very pleasing, very, warm cookie baking kind of scent, very sweet, very cosy, very comforting, even a tad cloying, but it does very much resemble a very sweet, sugared vanilla cookie. Much more cost effective than using a natural vanilla, and it will sit in the gourmand category. Natural vanillas are much more complex, earthier, they're darker, they can be boozy, they can take on so many different facets, and they're more seen in niche and indie creations. So the scent of natural vanilla can go in quite a few different directions, and there are 3 different types of vanilla in the world. So you have Madagascan or Bourbon vanilla, which of course comes from Madagascar, and that's the one that I'm probably the most familiar with. There's also Tahitian vanilla, which is a much rarer one. And then you've also got vanilla pompona, or West Indian vanilla, which of course comes from the West Indies. All these different vanillas can take on and offer so many different style of scent, so many different facets in fragrance. And it does take an artistic flair, a real perfumer to, I think, work with those kind of vanillas and really make something beautiful. If you've ever scraped the insides of a vanilla pod, you'll notice that all those little black seeds are very dark and quite rich, and if you've ever smelt them, you'll notice that it smells very treacly, slightly boozy, slightly sort of a toasted kind of a scent. I've got a little example. I haven't got a vanilla pod, unfortunately, by Nelson Massey, and it's vanilla bean paste. I prefer to use Madagascan vanilla bean, just to give you an idea with this toothpick. You'll be able to see all the little seeds on there, and that's really where all the scent is coming from. The Madagascan vanilla paste is actually, from what I remember using it, it's much thicker. It's a full black gloopy treacle paste. It's much thicker, but you can see all the little seeds. But that's an idea of a raw vanilla. Like I say, it offers you a multifaceted scent, and that can appear as either sweet, smoky, boozy, powdery, it can be floral, it can be fruity, it can be spicy. The first fragrance is a good example of one which is a typical straight up sweet vanillin kind of scent. This is by Juicy Couture, and this is Sucre. So as you can see, it's meant to resemble a cupcake. I think to some this is incredibly gaudy and pure tack, but I don't know why I like this so much. I just do. It appeals to my younger self, maybe, and it is a very young fragrance. It's very juvenile, sweet, kind of not really cupcakey scented, actually, just very sweet sugar cube style fragrance. There's a very synthetic sweet fruitiness from mandarin, but this is really all about vanilla, very sweet vanilla. I think there's a perfect balance of vanilla to sugar to fruits to floral, which means it doesn't lean too thick and sickly, which I don't like. This one is just a good balance of all of the things I mentioned, but it's a little retro, it is a little juvenile. I don't reach very often. I like sniffing it now and again. I tend to reach for this when I'm not feeling very well. I don't know, it makes me feel good, like a little sugary treat. That is Sucre. It is a very synthetic vanilla. I enjoy it, but that's my first example of vanilla fragrance. So let's continue with all the very fruity vanillas, keep them in categories. La Belle from Jean Paul Gaultier, and this is a fruity vanilla. This is pear, vanilla, and possibly either vetiver or ambroxing in the base. There's a little bit of a question mark over that one. Whatever it is, it's very delicious. It reminds me of pear crumble and custard. I think of this scent as my autumn pear because it's very warm, it's cozy, and the vanilla is offering a very custard vibe. For me, it's very custardy, which I suspect probably is vanillin, but it is very beautiful. It's very well done. This is the only Jean Paul that I actually really like, but I do consider it a vanilla fragrance overall. It's just that it's got the most beautiful amount of pear, juicy, sweet pear, and a lovely base of vetiver or ambroxan, but it is very beautiful. That's my second example of a fruity vanilla. Next one we have is by Montale, and this is sweet vanilla. And Montale are known for their use of synthetics, so it's more than likely going to be vanillin in here. I absolutely love this. I wore this the other day and I'd forgotten how much I really enjoy it. This is probably the closest fragrance I've got to smelling like something baked. But it's not just a one-dimensional cake or something. This is like the whole bakery. It's very warming, it's very sweet, but there's a beautiful powdery element to this as well. The apricot isn't really strong in here, but it does give it that little extra dimension of something fruity and sticky, like jam. And that powdery facet, that's another element that I really enjoy, and it very much reminds me of Parma violets. Not that this is particularly violety, but that chalky, dry, powdery thing you get in that kind of sweet is what I'm getting in here as well. I just find this incredibly addictive. It's very, very strong. It lasts absolutely forever, this fragrance. Most Montales tend to. I got a compliment wearing this. I was told I smelled like a bakery, which is fair enough. Like I say, this is the closest I've got to having a baked good fragrance, and I like that it has got a lot more facets, like a sweet treat on a glum day, if you like. So really enjoy that. That is Sweet Vanilla by Montale. So my next example of a fruity vanilla, although actually I wouldn't just call it fruity. Look, this is Kismet by Lubin. I would call this also aromatic, woody, and also a little bit animalic, but it's very wearable, it's very light. This is often compared to Shalimar. If you were to look up the, say, 10 most popular vanillas in fragrance, Shalimar will always be on that list. Shalimar, I've never smelled Shalimar, so I can't comment on that. But this is a very beautiful vanilla without it being a vanilla fragrance. It's the vanilla that really ties everything together in this fragrance and makes it very beautiful. Like I say, it has notes that make it very aromatic. The citruses in here make it very, very bright, very luminous. There's a Popanax and Labdanum which give it this very warm underbelly, like a resinous weight, which actually smells a little bit like licorice, just a tad licorice, like a rooty kind of vibe. But it's all tied together with what actually is bourbon vanilla, a really rich, beautiful vanilla. Very creamy. It's very it's quite a classy scent, and this is a scent I associate with a sunny autumn day, that perfect autumn day when it's crisp, it's cold, but it's sunny. So that is Kismet, and that is by Lubin. So this next vanilla I'd probably put in the same category as Kismet because it's bright and it's aromatic. It's by Sylvaine Delacourte and it is Virgile. Virgile is the most aromatic vanilla I've ever smelt. It is absolutely beautiful. I'll never get bored of just taking the cap off and giving it a good sniff. It just takes me somewhere. I can't explain it. It's very zen-like. It's so uplifting and peaceful at the same time. It's aromatic burst from rosemary and thyme, but with more emphasis on sage, which makes it feel really clean. There's a beautiful warmth and weight from leather and cedar. But it's the vanilla, I think, which is making this really beautiful, and that is this bourbon vanilla. It wraps itself around all those notes, making something really unique and just absolutely stunning. Very beautiful and very aromatic Virgile. A couple of honourable mentions here in what I consider to be an aromatic class of vanilla. First one we have is Arnie from Nishane. This is probably the most talked about vanilla at the moment. It's incredibly popular, very trendy. I think of this as aromatic because it has a very pronounced note of ginger in the beginning. I'm not familiar with the other notes, I just remember there being a very pronounced note of ginger. And it opens quite green and actually quite bitter. But it does dry down into probably the most rich, beautiful vanilla. The lovely Mia from Fabtrends Mia sent me a sample of this and I'm ever so grateful, so thank you so much, Mia. Nishane obviously is quite expensive, so this does dry down to a vanilla, a beautiful vanilla, but just a vanilla. It's a rich, syrupy vanilla, sticky sweet, really good, but it's not my vibe enough to warrant me buying a bottle of it. So that is Arnie by Nishane. My second honourable mention here is Lune Feline by Atelier des Or. So you may have seen the bottles on, you may have a bottle, or you may have just seen them here on YouTube or on Instagram or wherever, but it's the ones that have the very beautiful gold flakes, if you can see, which look really beautiful in the bottle. But I have a decant, which is plenty for me. So Lune Feline is actually quite a dark, very warming and slightly animalic vanilla. It's very rich and gloopy and syrupy, and it's also very opulent smelling. A very pronounced note of cardamom, which I think is a very sort of silky, milky, warming spice. I definitely can smell the pink pepper in this as well, and there's also a beautiful sandalwood and ambergris. That warming cardamom makes it opulent but very eastern smelling, and I always think of a Maharaja having a beautiful day at the spa with that cardamom or any kind of spice, you know, billowing into the air. The vanilla is just absolutely beautiful. I'm not sure what type of vanilla it actually is, but it is a very rich and luxurious one. Lune Feline, Atelier des Or. So the next ones are in a more woody category of vanilla. This one is called Whispers in the Library, and it's by the Maison Margiela. This is the line of replicas. In this case, it is a scent of a library. I think it does smell like a library. I don't think it smells like a book. I think it smells like a library. It's far more woody than papery. Aside from the vanilla, there's also pepper, there's also cedar, and there are woody notes. So it is very much about the wood. I love the balance in here. It's a very simple fragrance. It's not particularly complex. It's not particularly rich or dark or deep. It's just a really lovely woody vanilla. Although it doesn't list ebony, I always think of ebony wood when I smell this because it's quite a deep wood, and I think the pepper adds to the wood. It makes it slightly antique. The vanilla stops it just being dry and simple. It gives it just such a lovely sweetness, and also a bit of a creaminess, which would make you think of sandalwood. Very classy. It's very charming without being heavy, and I think it's a beautiful one for the autumn. Not quite strong enough, I think, for winter, but beautiful for the autumn. Makes me think of crispy autumn leaves or something. But yeah, lovely woody vanilla. Whispers in the Library, Maison Margiela. Another lovely woody vanilla here is by Tom Ford, and it is Vanille Fatale, and this is much richer than Whispers in the Library. It's a woody vanilla. There's a lot more notes in here. It has quite a boozy edge as well. But just to name a few, there's rum, coffee, tobacco, barley, mahogany, suede, oak moss, coriander and plum. It goes on and on and on. Much more complex, much deeper and richer. But what I get from here is this this very antiqued woody custard. And that's very much in a nutshell, because there's so much more going on. I think I can get a bit of that plum underpinning everything. Is a lot of woods. The mahogany is beautiful. It's such a rich wood. Obviously the tobacco is bringing a bit of smokiness. It's very rich, very complex, very classy. But like I say, in just a nutshell, it's a smoky, woody, rich custard. And it is really beautiful. So that is Vanille Fatale. So another woody vanilla, kind of edging on being a fruity vanilla, and possibly even a spicy one too. This is by Maison Francis Caggian, and this is Gentle Fluidity Gold. I find this to be very luxurious, but also very, very wearable. You get a bit of fruitiness from juniper. There's some woody notes in here. It's also nutmeg and musk, and I absolutely love nutmeg in fragrance. But of course you've got this beautiful vanilla as well. But it's not a heavy scent. It's actually very, very airy kind of vanilla with that kind of woody undertone. The juniper brings something that smells a bit more, to me, like a blueberry. There's something in here that gives it a touch of booze, sparkling booze, like a Prosecco. So it's a light, creamy, luxurious vanilla with a beautiful ribbon of fruits. A little bit of a woody warmth. But there's this sparkling champagne or Prosecco quality, which just makes it really classy. I just love this one. So that is Gentle Fluidity Gold. And that is what I consider to be a woody, somewhat fruity vanilla. So a third honourable mention here, because it is a decant, not a bottle. And I had the 100ml bottle and I sold it because I never reached for it. It's a decant of Noir Exquis by L'Artisan Perfume. It's actually a nutty vanilla. That's how I'd probably describe it. It's a very nutty vanilla, and it has a very dominant note of chestnut, along with maple sap and coffee, and obviously vanilla, and you've got some woody notes in here. This is really beautiful one. What I love about Noir Exquis, and what's making me wonder if I did the right thing in selling the entire bottle, is that you really can smell all those beautiful, rich, gourmand notes. The coffee actually is wrapped up with the vanilla in this one. Maple sap and chestnut sit on top, creating this beautiful, warm, nutty autumn fragrance. It's very rich. It definitely smells a tad boozy. It's got a kind of molasses sort of sugar, you know, like a rich golden deep kind of sugar. It is stunning. That is Noir Exquis by L'Artisan Perfume. So this next category of vanillas are all the floral vanillas. And my first one here is yet again another honourable mention, but this is probably the one I'd most want a bottle of out of all the other decants that I have. This is Angelique Noir by Guerlain, and this is part of their Art de Matière, which is the art and materials collection. So aside from the rather stunning and incredibly opulent note of vanilla that's in here, there's also pear, pepper and angelica, which is a plant that smells very green. It's kind of a bit bitter, a little bit sour. It reminds me of cream soda a little bit. Alongside this beautiful vanilla, it's also the star of the show, is this angelica. It brings this smooth and slightly sour green quality, which is why people described Angelique Noir as a green vanilla. The angelica is way more pronounced in the opening, and you get far more of that note, which brings a lot more green sharpness. Once you get past the opening, it just melds together with the most beautiful, warm, rich vanilla. The vanilla seems to get warmer and richer as it dries down. It continues to have this clean green halo from this note of angelica, which is what makes it incredibly unique and incredibly stunning. So that is Angelique Noir by the House of Guerlain. So my next floral vanilla is actually one of my newer fragrances. It was a real nice cheapie. I bought it blindly. So I heard the lovely Menahil from the Parfumeur, I'm talking about this one, and it sounded right up my street. I think it was about £29, and it is Vanille Violette by Les Senteurs Gourmands. This is pretty much vanilla and violet. That is, it really just is. It's incredibly soft. It's incredibly powdery. It's very, very simple, and it has just a nice balance of sweetness. It actually has got a note of sugar in here along with powdery notes. There's a note called Mountain Air. There's also violet and Parma violet in here, and that would explain its violet content. It is very heavy in the violet, it's so soft. It is that chalky Parma violet sweet. It does smell very synthetic, but because it's so soft and cotton wool-like, it just works. Something about it reminds me of a nurse. I don't think it smells particularly medical. I can't explain that. It's like the most gentle, sweet-natured nurse. That's how she would smell. If you like your powdery, violet, pretty fragrances, this is definitely one to check out. So that is Vanille Violette from Les Senteurs Gourmands. My next floral vanilla is from the House of Mancera, and this is Roses Vanille. And I find this fragrance to be so damn addictive. And you can see I'm not shying away from this fragrance, despite the fact that it is incredibly loud. It's very strong for me. I don't really like strong fragrances, but this one I make the exception for because it's so addictive. That hit of rose, a hit of vanilla. It's very jammy, it's very biscuity. That synthetic vanillin does give you that very much baked good, kind of a heavy biscuity baked good scent, but I don't know, it just seems to work. It certainly works in Roses Vanille. It's incredibly sweet. In fact, there's notes of sugar in both the top and mid, I believe. A bit of lemon in here to give it a sort of pinched sharpness to stop it being too cloying and too heavy. My jammy dodger fragrance. It's a biscuit with jam, strawberry jam. It's not a authentic gourmand. If it was, I don't think I'd enjoy it quite so much. I like that there is a syntheticness. It keeps it in the perfume realm as opposed to smelling authentically foodie, if that makes any sense. That is Roses Vanille by Mancera. So my next floral vanilla fragrance is the more refined and slightly more demure older sibling of Roses Vanille. It's from the House of Montale, and it is Intense Cafe. It's a lot of people's favourite, this one. A gourmand rose. I love gourmand roses. That's my favourite category, I guess, of fragrance, is a sweet gourmand rose. This does smell very similar to Roses Vanille, but it also differs enough. There is rose, the same as Roses Vanille. There's vanilla, the same as Roses Vanille, but there's also a beautiful coffee, beautiful milky, creamy coffee, which gets less intensive as it dries down, but then ends up mingling with a really beautiful rose note in here, and of course that vanilla. The vanilla doesn't feel quite so synthetic and biscuity as it does in Roses Vanille. This one just feels creamier and smoother. And overall, it's like this very milky cup of coffee with perhaps a little drop of rose syrup. But the rose is very, very strong as the more it dries down. It's the rose in here that I absolutely love. So that is Intense Cafe by Montale. So my last floral vanilla and my last vanilla to show you today is by the House of Nishane, 100 Silent Ways. So like I say, this is a floral vanilla. Well, the main focused floral in here is actually tuberose. I don't tend to enjoy tuberose. This is the only fragrance I have in my entire collection that is a tuberose fragrance. Tuberose to me is a flower that often smells like hairspray and bubblegum. Wet hair that's got hairspray in it and bubblegum. In here, the tuberose is melted perfectly with this stunning vanilla. And it's not like the vanilla in Honey, which was deep and rich and kind of syrupy almost. In here, the vanilla is whipped and fluffy, like whipped cream. More like French Chantilly whipped cream. So silky and beautiful. There's also another white floral facet from Gardenia. You've got sandalwood and vetiver in the base. There's a sweetness coming from peach as well, which doesn't make it too cloying. The peach gives it a bit of bounce, if you like. It's a bit clean as well. It's creamy, but it's also quite clean. Although it is very sweet and very delicious, I wouldn't say it's exactly a gourmand. It kind of sits equally in two categories, one foot being in a gourmand, the other foot being in a clean white floral. But it is delicious. It's got a slight hint of something marshmallowy and caramelly as well, but it's like a cream that's whipped to perfection, so airy, and it's just an absolutely beautiful fragrance, and it is one I'd put in my top 10 favourites. So that is 100 Silent Ways by Nishane. This pretty much sums up my vanilla focused fragrance collection. Now, I've got a lot of fragrances in my collection. I know there's a lot more that have vanilla in them, but like I say, this is the roundup of those that really do showcase that note of vanilla. So I really hope you enjoyed the video. What style of vanilla do you enjoy the most? And what is your favourite vanilla fragrance? Do let me know below. That's all, guys. I'll see you on my next one. Over and out.